All right, all right. Here we are from a Blanket Fort recording studio in a one-bedroom apartment in North Hollywood. This is People Pleaser. I'm Austin Archer, your host, rocking a PD shirt, PD merch. If y'all aren't listening to PD, what are you doing? At the very least, you should be enjoying PD's one-of-a-kind comedic sensibility on the internet. I was just saying earlier on the stream on TikTok over here, we got the stream on TikTok going for a little pre-show roll, and I was saying that, like, I am incredibly jealous of PD. PD is one of those internet content creators who managed to have the trajectory that I was trying to have with social media and with having like an internet audience. The second that I had 10,000 followers on TikTok, I was like, this means that I'm going to get people to listen to my podcast and my music. When I had 10,000 followers, I was like, I can get some of these people to listen to my music and my podcast. This is good. When I had 100,000 followers, I was like, oh, we're in business now. If out of these 100,000 people, 10,000 of them really like my stuff, really like my music, that's good. 10,000 big like music fans and podcast fans, we can work with that. It's been 4 years of making internet content full-time as my job and building my different platforms between YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, and nobody knows what this podcast is, and the just like 99.9% of the people who are in my internet audience have no idea that I write music and make music, despite the fact that like I'm posting videos of songs that I've written like at least once a week, but it's just algorithmically nobody sees them. But PD has been living my dream. PD not only is one of the most unique comedic voices on the internet, in my opinion, like he's managed to establish a voice that's so distinguished. It's like a Tim Robinson thing where you're like, oh, that's just yours. That's no one else. You're not doing an impression of anyone else. That's just you. That's just PD doing PD. And it's like, it's almost like Tim Robinson has a comedic voice that you can imitate. PD does not. PD has a comedic voice that if you try to do PD's like rhythm and style, it won't sound funny. Like if I try to quote PD back to you doing a PD joke, you'll be like, that doesn't sound funny. But it's like, trust me, it is. When I tell you about PD parting his hair down the middle and talking to himself and being like, oh, you're parting your hair down the middle? And he's like, yeah, like Jared Lego. And he's like, no, it's Jared Leto. And he's like, yeah, but you're just going for it. Full send. Yep. Full send. That doesn't sound like a funny thing. It is when PD does it. It's very, very funny. But anyway, PD managed to not only be this incredibly unique comedic voice and style, but also he has blasted out. He's made it out of social media. He's made it off of your phones and into your hearts with his amazing music. And he's living my dream. He's out there touring. He's out there selling out venues. I got this shirt when I saw him at the Fonda Theater in Los Angeles. Sold out show. Great show. He brought the house down. He's out there living the dream. He's doing it. He made it out. And I'm the kind of guy that it's totally possible for me to be fully jealous and also a huge fan and be really, really excited for the guy and not be like bitter or mad at him about it. Because it's not his fault that the algorithm hates my music. And that's what it is too. My friend London Laz posted a question on Threads recently, and he was like, he posted like a poll, and he said, when a video doesn't perform, is it the content creator's fault or like the content's fault or the algorithm's fault? And it was like 60-40. It was 60-40. 60% of people said it's the algorithm. 40% of people said the content. The reality is like, it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Like it can be both. Like when I'm posting videos of my music, that's me making a post that I know has been proven time and time and time and time again that the algorithm will never let people see that. So I know as the content creator, I'm sending a video out into the internet world to die. I know I'm doing that. So it's sort of both. Like it's both my fault and the algorithm's fault, because I'm making the video that I know the algorithm has told me very clearly I'm never going to let people see this, and I'm still doing it anyway. But still, it's like the fact that the video will never be seen by people is not my fault. That's not, and that, anyway, I'm making a video essay right now about the algorithm, and that should be out in the next few weeks. But that's not what this is. That's not what this is. This is the podcast, and welcome to it. We got people over on TikTok. We got people on YouTube. The title of the podcast this week is How to Avoid Becoming a Cynical Mess. And I think it's a little bit of a misleading title because it sounds like I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide on how to avoid becoming a cynical mess. But the reality is I'm sort of just as much asking this question to myself as I am hoping to work out some kind of answer to it with all of you live and in the moment of the podcast. That's the fun thing about the podcast is we sort of work stuff out live, unfiltered. There's no editing here. There's no me thinking about specifically how I want to word something. It's just sort of coming straight from the brain down into the mouth and falling out however it falls out. And that's really fun. But yeah, the reason this question is something I'm asking of myself just as much as I am positing it to all of you is I think it's been occurring to me lately that like the older I get in life, the more I think that the key to having a long, healthy, happy life, a life that you can mostly enjoy and find a lot of joy in and find a lot of peace in, is the key to that is to find a way to avoid the hypnotic draw of cynicism. And I just think that the older you get, the longer you live, the longer you stick around, the more opportunities you're going to have to become really hardened and cynical. My mom's here. She says, "Hi, sweetie." Hello, mom. Hello, mother. Hello, Julie. I love you. But yeah, the older you get, the longer you stick around, the more opportunities you're going to have to become cynical about life. The more life is going to like disappoint you and hit you with things that you feel like are unfair and unwarranted. And the more you're going to see like, just the seemingly like lack of sense to all of it. Like it doesn't make it like in my brain, it's like, it doesn't make sense that a person could aspire to be a billionaire. Like that just like to me, owning $1 billion it's just one of the most immoral things you can do in modern society is owning at least $1 billion. Like there's just no rational, reasonable, ethical, moral purpose to that. It's like nothing but it's just pure undiluted self-centered ego. And it's almost one of the most cynical things a person can do is just be like, I've decided to completely give up on trying to contribute in a positive way to the world in any way. My number one goal is I want to see how many numbers I can get in my several bank accounts. I just want to see how big those numbers can get. And that's what I will base the value of my life on. Meanwhile, like we live in this hellscape society where money is the cause of and solution to the vast majority of our problems. And there's so much good that could be done with an amount of money like that, an amount of money that's sort of unfathomably large. And all of the people who are interested in having that much money have no interest in using the money for that purpose. So you stick around long enough and you see stuff like this and you see people who are behaving in enormously cynical ways and benefiting from it too. And you see like the incongruity there and the injustice there. And it's really hard not to just fall into a very cynical worldview and become a person who's very hardened and a person who just has no interest in being self-reflective or charitable or soft or kind or looking for joy in their life. Guy, I watched this video on Reddit earlier today where this like older woman, it was in the Reddit subreddit boomers being boomers or something like that. And it was definitely a woman of that generation. But she was like at this office where she was looking for a wristband that maybe like a hospital where they were giving her a wristband. And there wasn't anyone at the desk because she was like leaning over the desk and like grabbing onto the desk and leaning over it and rummaging through their stuff. And the whole desk that she was leaning on just falls over. The whole thing just comes down. She just breaks this whole thing. And then somebody comes over and they're like, what happened? And rather than being like, having any sort of humility or being like, I'm so sorry. Oh my God. Like no one was here and I was looking for my wristband and I knocked this thing over. Let me help you put this back. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was going to fall over. She just goes, well, your desk fell over and almost hit me. Your desk, I was just standing here and your desk fell over and it almost hit me. And it's like, I don't think in that moment that person was like, embarrassed and trying to dodge responsibility. I genuinely think that person has become such a hardened person and has such a like cynical worldview that she has become genuinely incapable of any sort of self-awareness. You know, it's like Donald Trump syndrome. It's just sort of like, it doesn't even occur to her that she shouldn't have been like leaning over the desk and like rummaging through their stuff. She should have just like waited till someone who worked there came up so she could be like, hey, could you help me get my wristband? It doesn't even occur to her that that's maybe not the way she should have been behaving. The first thought is, your desk almost hit me and hurt me. You know, it's all about just like me, and how life is engineered to be against me and to hurt me, and how everything, like, you know, her first thought when she walked up was like, yeah, just my luck. No one's here working at the desk to help me. No one's here to give me my wristband. Wow. Of course that would be the case. Well, I guess I'm going to have to help myself out. So she goes over to help herself out just the same way it always is. Everything in my life is it's either I do it or it doesn't get done, and the desk falls over. And her first thought isn't, geez, I really need to be more patient. You know what? I get myself into these situations a lot, and I need to like calm down, take a breath, and learn to be more patient and more like, you know, curious and inquisitive. Her first thought is, of fucking course that would happen to me. Of course I would just be, I'm just sitting here just trying to help myself out because no one else will help me. And then this thing falls over. Of course, because that's the world I live in, is where the whole world is engineered to be against me. And I know I sound like a really judgmental jerk right now. I sound like I'm really being hard on this lady, and I kind of am. But the fact of the matter is, like, I relate to this lady. I relate to the experience that she had. I live on the edge of being that person, and I feel the draw to be that person in my life regularly. I feel the magnetic pull of that kind of tuned out cynicism where I just sort of look at life and go, it's never going to work out the way I want it to. I'm never actually going to have the kinds of things I want to have on my terms, on my timeline. There's always going to be some kind of catch. There's always going to be some person who's getting more than me, who I think I could be doing better than, who, you know, I think I could be doing their job better, yet they have the better opportunity. There's always going to be, you know, the more attractive person that I wish I could be with and dating, but they don't want me, so I have to settle for something. I feel that draw in my life toward that kind of cynicism. And so I'm starting to really ask myself, like, how do you avoid that? Because I really do believe that that the longer you live, the more opportunity there is to fall into that. I also think that it hits people at different times. The opportunity to be overcome by cynicism enters people's lives at different points and at different times. And I definitely think that the earlier that it gets a hold of you, the harder it is to find your way out of it. So maybe a woman like that, the woman in that clip, maybe it just grabbed onto her early in life. Maybe she just had a rough upbringing and it just she never really had a chance to like see a life beyond that cynical outlook. And there's just never really been an opportunity for her to grow from that. And I think that there's a certain kind of privilege that exists in being able to like have the cynicism start to enter into your space later in life, to be able to like be raised in relative comfort and enjoying your childhood and stuff like that. But that's not to say that I think it's impossible to find your way out of it if it hits you early, if the horrors are upon you from a very early age. The reality of the horrors is that they are there from before the time we're born. The horrors are just part of it. It's just like the horrors were here before any of us were, and they will be here after we are gone. And it's sort of a matter of like learning to live with them and alongside them. Uh, Man, I've been feeling the pull of the cynicism lately in my life. I said this before we started recording, but I've been spending a lot of time in the last week in the comments. I had several videos that like had to do with communication and with the miscommunications that occur in the comments of videos. And I try as best as I can these days to stay out of the comments as the most that I possibly can. But like a few things happened recently. One is I had a video do really, really well on YouTube. And like anytime one of my videos does well on YouTube, I pay attention to it because that's a platform I'm really actively trying to build. But that meant that I was really watching like every new comment that came in. And I started like engaging with the new commenters because I was trying to like get this audience engaged and get people like, interested in what I'm doing on the YouTube channel. But that meant that I started like spending too much time with the comment section. and the comment section is a space where, boy, that is a petri dish for my cynicism to thrive and for my most negative attributes to come out in full force. And then I made like several videos on TikTok and Instagram where like I was really engaging with commenters and with the and it's like I was commenting on how easy it is to have miscommunications in a comment section and how common it is to have miscommunications and misunderstandings in a comment section. And as I was commenting on that, I was also actively engaged in several overlapping miscommunications and misunderstandings with several different internet strangers who have their own different parasocial relationships with me. And it was all just very overwhelming. And it also just made me very like, I hate, I don't like it. And the reality is like, I need to be better about just like doing my part, which is I make the video and I post it and then I let the comments be the comments. But then I need to protect myself better from that. But also like, man, like, what is the antidote to the animosity I feel when communication breaks down? I have such a hard time with not being understood perfectly and with communication breaking down. I feel so like personally attacked and offended when I feel like I've spoken in incredibly clear terms and people still seem like they're going out of their way not to hear me. And it's like, what is the antidote to that? What is the fix? What's the way out of it? What's the way? How do we bounce off of the cynical impulse and get into something that's healthier and more productive and that could potentially be the key to a more enjoyable life? I think I might have a possibility. This is something I'm ruminating on right now, and I'm going to throw it out there and then I'm going to get into the comments pretty quicker. I think this is going to be a relatively short episode of the podcast. But I'm in love with the movie Beautiful Things right now. Or not Beautiful Things, sorry, Poor Things. Slip of the Mind. I think I talk a lot about my record Beautiful. I like him such a like shill for my own stuff. I'm constantly telling people to go out and buy my double vinyl of Beautiful Things. That was a Freudian slip. Poor Things. Yorgos Lanthimos' movie Poor Things. I just went and saw it again for the second time in theaters. And I needed it. I needed a palate cleanser. It's been a rough first few months of 2024 for the movies. I just like I'm so glad that Dune Part 2 is here because we really need it. We really need that. Like we need a good movie to come out because I I actually think that Dune Part 2 is going to be the first good movie released in 2024, and it's coming out in March. And that's I mean, usually January and February are not great, but usually there's like one or two decent movies per month in those months. I think Dune 2 is going to be the first good movie that we have, and we need it. But luckily the awards contenders from 2023 are still in the theaters, so I got to go watch Poor Things again, and I loved it even more the second time than I did the first time. Uh, my parents hated this movie. It's definitely I get it. I think it's a generational thing maybe. Older people in my audience when I posted on Instagram about how much I love this movie were like, "Did I just not get it? Like what?" And I just was like, "I don't know." And maybe what we're talking about here in this episode, maybe this is a key to it or something. I don't know. Uh because maybe there's a little bit of like stuck in your ways cynicism there that is keeping you from being able to enjoy this film, or maybe it's just an old-fashioned sensibility towards sex and sexuality. The movie is very sexual and deals with there's a lot about human sexuality in this movie, a lot more so than you see in most mainstream Hollywood films. So much to the point that like my mother has said to me multiple times, I can't believe it's not XXX rated. And I think she might have a point. Like I've seen films be rated NC-17 that are tamer than Poor Things when it comes to their like the amount and the frequency and the graphic nature of their sexual content. So I think that I would not have been surprised if the MPAA had decided to give Poor Things an NC-17 rating. There was probably some lobbying that happened there so that the movie could be a more legitimate awards contender. But I don't know. I don't watch the movie and feel overwhelmed by the sexuality in it, or feel like it's too much, or like it's distracting from what the movie's about, because I think that it's very central to what is happening in the movie and what the movie is about. And I think it's dealt with in a way that I'm not sure I've ever seen a film deal with human sexuality. And that's because this movie deals with life in a way that I think is so specific and particular and profound and also simple. And it really boils down to, I don't want to spoil too much about the film. I really want people to go out and see it. But it boils down to this one aspect where there's a character, I'm not going to say who, but there's a character who is in the process of dying. And this character says, "It's all very interesting what's happening." And I was watching it the second time through. The first time that line happened, I just thought, "Oh, what a peculiar line. I like that. It's just like odd, like this whole movie, so wonderfully odd." And the second time it happened, I like started to weep. I started to cry, and I just thought, that's so beautiful. That's so like stunning, the way that this person is choosing to view the end of their life. And it's actually emblematic of the way that this character has chosen to view their entire life, which is uh, with with sort of relentless curiosity. They just approach every single situation, no matter how difficult the situation is, no matter how painful the situation is, no matter how uncomfortable the situation may make other people. Everything in life they approach with this sense of just like unending interested curiosity up until the very end. So even just looking at the process of dying and just going like, this is all very interesting. It's just so interesting what's happening. Like the way that I'm feeling as as I'm feeling my organs shutting down, and I'm feeling things, uh, yeah, I don't, somebody just said, I'm going to pop over here really quickly to the comments, but I will come back to these. But somebody just said on YouTube, Axiom Razor said, "Understanding is the pathway to brushing off BS. You're only speaking to the people who will understand you. Not everyone will understand you." And that's true too. That like not everyone will understand you all of the time perfectly. Of course they won't. And that's fair, totally true. But I think that curiosity, this is the thing that I'm trying to get at, is I think that curiosity is the antidote to feeling cynical about that, because there's two paths you can take once you come to terms with the fact that being perfectly understood by everyone is impossible. Once you reckon with that, there's two ways to approach that reality. And one is to become angry and resentful about it. Like it shouldn't be that way. I should be able to speak incredibly clearly and be understood. If I'm using clear, direct, specific language, I should be able to be understood. Uh, like that there shouldn't be a reason why someone should hear me saying the exact opposite of what I'm saying. That shouldn't happen. And you can be mad about that, or you can be curious about it. And this actually happened in this sequence of videos that I made too. I made this video where I was responding to another content creator who was saying something that was pretty vague. And I actually think that the vagueness of her video is what made her video so popular. She was saying, her message was essentially, why don't men understand hints? It drives me nuts that men don't understand hints. She didn't actually say in her video what specifically she meant by that. But what happened was every person who watched the video figured, they just instantly had a context for what she must mean when she says that. So like guys who like single guys like me who are dating, a lot of us assumed that what she was talking about was like, when I want a guy to make a move and hit on me and I'm making hints that I want him to like ask me out or something, why doesn't he get that? And a lot of women who are just out in the world constantly receiving unwanted attention from men watched it and went, my instant interpretation of what she's saying is, why don't men understand when I'm hinting that I want them to lay off and back off? And then there were a lot of people who were in relationships who got a different thing, where it was like people who are married were like, yeah, when I want my partner to take out the trash or do the dishes and I don't want to have to spell that out. He should understand that. And sometimes I make a hint about like, oh, the sink's pretty full, like, why doesn't he get what I'm saying? And everyone sort of just contextualized what she was saying into their own life with whatever was most immediately emotionally resonant for them. That's what they decided she meant by why don't men understand hints, myself included. I did the same thing. We all just sort of assumed. But then I made a video responding to that where I was very clear about like my personal experience and my personal like, well, oh, okay, well, I require really clear affirmative consent before I will pursue a person or make a move with a person, because I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable or unsafe. And that was my response, where I'm using like really clear language about talking about, receiving affirmative consent to pursue someone romantically. And then in the comments of my video, all of these people were like, what are you talking about? Why are you responding to her like this? What are you like? She's talking about weaponized incompetence, or she's talking about not wanting negative attention from men. Like what's wrong with you? And none of us really realized that the core of our misunderstanding is that we all began with a vague video that was communicating in vague terms. And we all began by assuming we understood what that video meant. And I was first upset by all of the miscommunication that was happening in my comments, but it shifted to something usable and helpful for me and for a lot of the people in my audience, I think, when I started to get curious instead. So my frustration and my cynicism was able to shift into something a little more interesting and useful when I decided to get curious about like, what's happening here? Why is this breakdown in communication occurring? And that's when I realized, oh, it all centers around what our subjective interpretation of her original video was. And based on our subjective interpretation of her original video, that's where we arrive at how we're going to communicate moving forward. And if we don't agree on if our subjective interpretations of her original video are different, and we're not aware that we have different subjective interpretations of that video, we're going to have a hard time communicating clearly. I like when someone pops in and says, catch me up, please. I've been talking for 30 minutes. It's so much stuff. Somebody in the comments was like, catch me up, please. Yeah, let me just do a quick recap of the last 30 minutes of the podcast. You're just going to have to try to hang tough, unfortunately. You're going to have to try to pick things up from context clues. Yeah, and I think you even hear, like, you hear it. The way that I just responded to that commenter, you hear how quickly my impulse and my instinct is to go towards cynicism and to sort of make a dig at someone and to sort of need to like bust someone's balls or bust someone's chops. Like, it's right there for me. And I really don't want it to be. I want to be a more curious person. Even after I made my second video where I explained that I think the miscommunication was coming from this, like from these differing interpretations of this original video about hints, there were still people who couldn't understand what I was saying and still were doubling down that I was doing something wrong. And like at that point, I don't know what to do. It's like, I guess, do I just get even more curious about like, well, what's going on there? When I even spell out, oh, I understand what happened here. I understand why we miscommunicated here. And then I tell them exactly what happened and they go, no, I don't care about that. You're still wrong. It's like, okay, well, what's happening there? you know? And maybe the thing is like, maybe part of being curious is not necessarily needing to solve things, but just allowing there to be mystery in things too. I think part of like, so that character that I was talking about in Poor Things, who's dying and says, it's all very interesting what's happening. There, I don't know if that character is necessarily trying to solve death and the mystery of like, is there a soul? Where does the soul go? Will there be some kind of continuation? Or if they're just sort of looking at it going, fascinating. And I can sort of do that too. It can diffuse something. I can go, So even after I get curious and think I find a workable solution to where the breakdown in communication must have happened, you're still committed to the miscommunication. Like you're still digging in your heels like, nope, I actually prefer the miscommunication. And can I be curious about that? Can I instead of looking at that and going, geez, people suck. People are so annoying and some people just suck. And like, that's what I want to do. That's what I really, really want to do. But can I instead just go, how fascinating, how interesting. Wow. What's going on there? I wonder what happened in that person's life that makes them not open to wanting to find a solution to the miscommunication, but wanting to rather commit to the miscommunication. What's going on there? And this is, I really, I think that the whole movie, Poor Things, you should go see it, but I think it's a story about how curiosity can save you. And the main character, Bella Baxter, played by Emma Stone has said this in interviews. She said, it's a love story about a woman who's falling in love with the process of being alive. And I think that that's such a beautiful way to sum up the film. And it is that. It's like, there's a lot that happens to Bella that could harden her and make her turn her heart against the human experience and against the experience of being alive. And characters are constantly giving her ammo and constantly giving her fuel to become a more cynical person and to become a person who doesn't have a lot of faith in humanity or in the prospect of having a joyful life. But her saving grace time and time again is her ability to approach things with curiosity and just with sort of the eyes of a person who's just interested in what's happening. She's not offended. She's not like mad. She's just curious. People try to attack her and people try to like do really violent things to her. And she just sort of looks at them like, what an interesting way you're behaving right now. How strange that you're behaving like that. And it sort of keeps her this very like amazingly enlightened and elevated person that's so easy to fall in love with and to like. And I think it's what makes the film so great. It's what makes the movie such a wonderful world to live in. There's so many awful things that are sort of happening in this weird, whimsical world, but Bella moves through it with such a like hopeful, optimistic curiosity. It's infectious. And I do think there's something there about avoiding the cynical pitfalls of life by approaching life with an unending curiosity. I think that you can approach grief this way. I think that like there are things that I'm so afraid of. There are people I'm deathly afraid to lose. There are things and like events that I'm like, if I live long enough, there are certain events that will take place that I think might break me. And I'm not sure if I will be able to survive those. And it's like, when the time comes, can you remember to go, this is interesting. So this is what this feels like. It doesn't mean that it's not going to fucking be excruciating, but can you go like, huh? I always go back to this. I've talked about this a few times on the podcast, but I always go back to like having kidney stones because it's a really like palpable physical thing that's a really good like analogy for pain and sort of anticipated pain. As far back as I can remember, probably from the time I was like 13 or 14, one of the things that I've been afraid of is kidney stones. There are like a few things of like, you know, like I'd never been stung by a bee before and I didn't want to get stung by a bee. It seemed like a manageable pain, like a pain that wasn't going to be unbearable, but I still was just like, I don't want to find out what a bee sting feels like. And then I got stung by a bee a couple of years ago and it was fine. It happened right before I was doing a play and I was a little bit worried, like, what if I'm allergic and I'm going to find out on stage and I'm going to die? But it was fine. It didn't really hurt that bad. But kidney stones, I was always afraid of kidney stones. I just was like, I don't want to find out because the way that people described the pain, I just was like, yeah, that sounds like something that if I can go through my life without having to do it, I'll be good. I'm fine without having to do that. And then, but like the thing about it is like, we know stuff about kidney, like we know like some of the things that might contribute to it, but it's sort of like your appendix rupturing or something. It's just like, it could just happen anytime. Like you just like hope that it doesn't. And then one day you're like, oh, I think my appendix is bursting. And it's like, yeah, it just like you don't really get to control whether it happens or not. You don't really know whether there's a kidney stone forming currently in your kidney right now that's going to be a problem in a month or 2 or 6 months or a year. It could be happening right now and there's not really much you can do about it. But when it did happen to me, when the kidney stones finally came for me, it was I was correct to be as afraid of them as I had been my whole life. Unlike the bee sting, the kidney stones surpassed my expectation of how bad a thing could hurt. I was constantly kind of amazed at how bad it hurt. It hurt in a different way though, and there were things I just learned things about them, and there were like I think about this time a lot. These 2 times that I had kidney stones. I had kidney stones like back to back in the course of like a couple months. And one of the like, yes, I was in a lot of pain and it wasn't fun, but there was like a curiosity there that sort of made it like, I don't want to say fun and I don't want to say happy and I don't want to say like cool, but it made it like definitely an experience that stands out. It's an experience that I think about often that I'm like, that's so fascinating that I had imagined all of these different ways that pain might feel and that pain might manifest. And then when it showed up, it didn't feel anything like how I had imagined it would feel. It felt worse than anything I could have imagined, but it was a different pain than I had ever had before. It was like, oh, so it was a totally new kind of transformative experience with pain where it was like, oh, I can't believe my body's even capable of doing what it's doing right now. I don't even know, like, I can't believe I'm conscious. I can't believe I'm not passing out with how much this hurts. But also it was like this very interesting thing. Like I kept thinking to myself, like, I can't believe I'm doing it. I can't believe I'm like withstanding the pain and that like this is actually happening and that I'm like managing this. It was all like really, really fascinating, you know? And I feel like there's a way through pain there where like you're not going to be spared the sensation of whatever it is that you're feeling, but maybe you can survive it a little better with a curiosity, with being like, oh, so this is what it feels like to lose your parents. Okay. Okay. I wondered about this my whole life. This is what it feels like. Okay. That hurts so much and in different ways than I imagined it would have hurt, but beyond my wildest imagination. But to like maintain a curious observation of what's happening to you in your pain. I think I don't know. There's something there that I think is really kind of a cool little magic trick that I'm really interested in right now. Okay, let's go over to some comments, and let's hear what you think. I've been talking about curiosity. You can talk to me about curiosity and your thoughts on curiosity and approaching difficulty and pain and hardship with curiosity. Or if you want, you can also offer your suggestions on antidotes for cynicism. I'm asking the question to you as well. How do we avoid becoming a cynical, coarse, calcified rock of a person? How do we stay soft and malleable and still experience joy throughout our lives? What are the antidotes? Tad Murrows on YouTube said, John Green made such a good point on this. You're making content for those who want to see it. The Fault in Our Stars was wildly successful, yet 98% of Americans haven't read it. Okay, so this is, again, more commentary on making content for the people who are like the people who understand it. Those are the people you're actually making that content for. And the people who don't understand it, you're not making it for them. And that, you know what, there's actually something definitely to be said about that. It happened actually earlier today, where I posted a teaser trailer for a movie that I'm in that comes out this summer. And I can talk, I've talked about this a few times on the podcast, but like, baby, the trailer's dropping. The trailer's gonna be in Dune 2. I'm so excited about that. Like, Dune 2 is gonna be the biggest hit so far of 2024. And before the movie, everyone's going to be watching the trailer for Horizon, an American Saga, written and directed by and starring Kevin Costner, and also featuring ya boy. And I posted the tease for the trailer. The trailer drops tomorrow, and everyone in the cast, we've all been posting the tease for the trailer that drops tomorrow. And somebody in my comments was like, oh, so I guess this is why you've been so wishy-washy on Palestine. And I was like, like, instantly my temper was at 1,000. I was like, you fucking asshole. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, I'm trying to share something that's joyful and exciting in my life right now, and you just can't help yourself. Like, you've got to show up and be like, oh, so this is why this guy's a bad ally. That's why this. Oh, so it's because he's Hollywood. Like, he's in a Hollywood movie, and that's why he's not. That's why he's wishy-washy on Palestine. First of all, I'm not wishy-washy on Palestine. I've been very clear on this podcast several times, and on my YouTube channel and on TikTok and Instagram, that I stand with the Palestinian people. I want to free Palestine. I stand against the genocide and ethnic cleansing that's happening in Gaza. And I want the international community to be harsher on Israel when it comes to finding a workable ceasefire and achieving peace and an end to the mayhem for the Palestinian people. That, to me, is not unclear. When I say that, that's very, very specific and clear. That's not wishy-washy. That's not hemming and hawing. That's very direct, clear language. And I've said that many, many times. And what I realized as I was just seething with rage about this person who's coming into a space where I'm trying to express joy and excitement and like calling out my advocacy for their pet thing, like the thing that's the most important thing to this person. They want to make sure that I know that if I'm not only exclusively posting about that thing, that means that my advocacy is inadequate or fake or doesn't rise to the level that they think it should. And what I had to realize with this person was the stuff that I've been making, the stuff that I've been saying about Palestine isn't for him. I'm not saying what I've been saying for him. I'm not saying it for his approval. And if I am, I'm doing it wrong. If I'm advocating for the things that I'm advocating for to get approval from that guy, to make sure that that guy thinks that I'm doing a good enough job at being an ally, then that's not useful to anyone. But I think that's a really good point about, like, I'm making the stuff I'm making for the people who want to hear it. And I've chosen to communicate my advocacy in a way that doesn't shit on other people for communicating their advocacy in the way that they want to communicate theirs. I've chosen to communicate my advocacy in a way that holds space for nuance and multiple approaches and viewpoints. And a lot of other people feel like the way to show your advocacy on this issue is to be hard-lined and absolutist about it. And that's their prerogative, but that's not the way that I've chosen to show my advocacy. And because of that, people like this guy in my comments today were like, oh, so you're kind of this is why you're wishy-washy. They see my advocacy as being inadequate. They see it as being insufficient. They see it as being, I might as well just be like pro-genocide, because if I'm not 100% with them or doing things the way that they want me to do things, then I'm just as bad as the worst person in the world to them. And that person is not a person that my content is intended to reach. That person has no interest in being reached by my message. So yeah, I think that's an interesting thing, that it's like, I'm not actually making that for them. Okay, going back to the comments, Tad Murrows again had some interesting stuff. Says, antidote for cynicism: ask yourself if you truly value the opinion of whomever you're speaking to. If not, feel free to disengage. That's also just the situation that I just said. It's a really good point right there. It's just sort of like, hey, look, me and this guy don't agree on what the best. I personally think that people like that guy are actually hurting the Palestinian cause. I think that they are like poisoning the well of the discourse. I think that they are making people not want to engage with the discourse because they're making it like a very unsafe environment and a really toxic environment. It's sort of like, yeah, come into this ring and talk about this thing with us, but just be advised, if you make one false move that we don't like, we are going to eat your face. We are going to tear you apart if we feel like you're not saying things or wording things in the exact right way. You can totally be on our team and you can have the exact same position and ideas as us, but if we feel like you're voicing it in any kind of way that we don't like, we're going to like put you on blast as the enemy. And that creates an environment where people do not want to get involved. That people are afraid to voice their advocacy because people have made it a very scary place, a very scary space to step into. Like, I think that hurts the cause. I think that we would see more people posting more regularly about this thing if there wasn't constantly this energy of like, I see these posts all the time where people are like, yeah, I post about this a lot, and if you don't, you're a piece of shit. It's just sort of like somebody I saw posted this the other day. They were like, yeah, I'm sorry if the amount that I post about Gaza makes you uncomfortable. The amount that you post about it makes me uncomfortable. Like, your silence makes me really uncomfortable. And it's just like, they can't just advocate for the thing without simultaneously attacking everyone who's reading their advocacy and being like, me saying this makes me better than you. I'm saying this because I'm a good person, and you're not saying this because you're a bad person. And I'm like, I don't think that creates an environment personally that invites people to join the cause and to join the team. I think that it creates a very like scary, toxic environment where people are like, if I get publicly involved, are you guys gonna like ruin my life in a few weeks when I accidentally post the wrong thing that you don't like? Like, it doesn't create a really, but you're right. Like, so what I realized about that person is, me and that person don't have the same viewpoint about how to approach this. And I don't really care if that person finds my advocacy to be insufficient or unhelpful. I find their advocacy to be unhelpful and toxic. So we have a disagreement there. Degenerate Carpenter on TikTok says, because they don't care about those causes, they're self-serving narcissists. Okay, so interesting comment here, because I tend to agree with you, and I really want to agree with you, and I really want to languish in that stew, because I feel the same way. I'm like, oh God, you're also fucking sanctimonious and self-serving and self-righteous. But God, what we're talking about here, and I'm going to give this commenter the benefit of the doubt because the theme of the podcast is avoiding cynicism. Now, the magnetic pull to just write these people off as self-serving narcissists is really, it's strong. I want to see if I can avoid it and lean into curiosity instead and just go, no, a lot of these people are devoting all of their time right now to shedding light on what's going on in Gaza and to making sure that the internet continues talking about this. And there's something noble in what they're doing, even if it does feel a little self-righteous and sanctimonious. And can I retain a curiosity about why it is they might be so vitriolic to anyone who's not showing advocacy in the exact same way that they are? And yeah, and I think that there are answers there if I'm curious, and there's answers in like, well, they just feel like the stakes are incredibly high. They feel like this is an ongoing, urgent situation that isn't getting in, that doesn't feel like it's being talked about with an appropriate level of urgency. And that's valid. And that's something that I think we can understand. Okay, let's see. Let's see where the comments are. Again, talking about curiosity, talking about antidotes to cynicism. My friend Jackie on YouTube says, my straight white female roommate is that way about trans rights, constantly posting about that she's angry that everyone is not as angry as she is about it. And if you don't like her posts, you're a piece of shit. Yeah. So totally, yeah. And it's like, look, from a curious standpoint, I really relate to and empathize with your roommate's position, because I also feel like, I mean, I don't actually get mad that like not as many people as me are talking about trans rights. What I get mad about is like, how come I keep having to explain the same thing over and over again? How come conservatives haven't updated their arguments in forever, in 60 years? Like, how come the conversation isn't advancing and getting, like, I just have to keep going back to like the simple fact that like trans people exist. I keep having to go back to the simple fact of like, no, there's more than two gender expressions in the world, because there are. Because if you live in the world and you pay attention to just like human beings, you just observe that there just are more than two expressions of gender occurring in the world. So like, that's just so fundamental and basic and frustrating. So I relate to the frustration, but also I totally hear you, Jackie. And it drives me nuts when people make part of their advocacy calling out the audience that they're hoping to reach. You know, I advocate for queer visibility and clear inclusivity and, you know, queer dignity all the time with my platforms and channels. But I try to do so in a way that's like, and if you're not saying what I'm saying, you're a bad person. Cause like, who is that for? That does feel so self-serving and sanctimonious and off-putting. And I just personally, I don't want that to be the way that my message is received by the people I'm hoping will receive it and do the most with it. But yeah, it is, God, that is so off-putting and puts such a bad taste in the mouth. Jackie says, I told her it makes her unapproachable on a topic that can already be difficult to discuss, and folks are less likely to engage with her. And I agree. I personally believe that is, it actually makes people less likely to engage with the subject matter in the conversation. It doesn't. And again, going back to curiosity, if you don't feel like you're presenting your information from a perspective that's curious, from a perspective that's open to feedback and that wants people to be asking questions, if you don't feel like you're presenting a space where you're hoping for feedback, if you're presenting your information in a way that's like, fuck you, like, here's all this information that you should know, and fuck you, and by the way, fuck you, to just everyone, not just to like conservative bigots, but just to anyone watching. Like, oh, and by the way, you liberals who performatively say you care about this stuff, if I don't see you posting about it, then fuck you too. If that's the way that you're delivering your message, then it does. I believe it doesn't encourage people to engage with it. And I also believe, again, I believe it's a very cynical approach to sharing information. I believe it's an approach to sharing information that already assumes that the audience is against you anyway. It already assumes bad faith on the part of anyone who might be receptive to it. And that's a very cynical worldview. So you do have to have a sort of optimism to be brazen enough and audacious enough to post things publicly that you're hoping will have some kind of drop in the bucket effect on the culture. There does have to be some amount of hopeful optimism and curiosity in there. If it's all just cynicism, if it's just like, yeah, I'm going to post about it, but none of you stupid people care about this stuff anyway because you're all awful, unlike me, who's great. Yeah, I don't, like, you're doing enough to satiate your own conscience, but that cynicism isn't really helping what it's not helping your message be open to. It doesn't feel like your message is creating a space where people can approach and participate and take it in. It's interesting. I get accused all the time, and this is when I spend too much time in the comments. I talked about spending too much time in the comments. I get accused all the time of like, by people of like, oh, I thought you were open to feedback. I guess not. But it's always like from people who like show up in my comments with like the most rude thing to say, just unprompted. Like they're just like, and it's always people who are just like, I've been following your channel for a long time. And I don't know, I thought this video was pretty bad. Like I thought you did a pretty bad job on this one. And I actually really disagreed with it. And I thought that you were wrong on everything you said. And I'm just like, okay, like, cool. Thanks for letting me know. And they're like, sorry, you're so defensive. I thought you were open to feedback. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm open to like a curious conversation, but if you're just going to approach me with like just being rude for no reason, and also give it this caveat of like, I'm one of your fans, so you need to let me say this, that sucked and you're bad. If you're just going to be a dick, I'm going to let you know. like I'm going to give you feedback on your feedback. Anyway. The real corn pop on TikTok is giving me some heavy negative feedback right now. Says, my man, let your guests join the convo, my man. We want to participate with you. Yeah, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. Here we go. Mr. Feast says, what did you have for dinner? Okay. I don't want to say what I had for dinner. I'm kind of ashamed of it. It was something fast food. And then I'm going to have leftovers from a place called Checker Hall that I went to last night. That's really good. Let's see. Born to Bark says, and usually from a zero content account. Yeah, that's right. When I get that kind of like feedback, it's usually from a person who's never made content in their life before. And they're just like, yeah, this one wasn't particularly well made. And I'm like, cool. Thank you for letting me know. Like, thanks for that. Yeah, you don't need to tell me that. Like when you watch one of my videos that you didn't enjoy, you don't need to be like, by the way, this one didn't like it. It's just like, okay, all right. By the way, this is free. I make these for free. Like you are enjoying my work, my labor for free. You're not paying me for the labor. It's not like a comedy show that you bought a ticket to and you're like, well, I bought a ticket for this and you're not making me laugh. It's like you are enjoying my hours of work for free. And if you don't enjoy it, you really could just scroll. The real Corn Pop says, I'm literally trying to engage more with you because I like your stuff, dude. Yeah, okay, so say something else. So say something to contribute to the conversation. Right now, you're just complaining that like your comments aren't being read, but you need to say something that contributes to the conversation then. You need to just like stop complaining and contribute to the conversation. Also, I love when people Again, people who I just say it that they like to go like, "Hey, I like you. I'm a fan of yours. Like, so you should allow me to do this. Like, I should be allowed to complain here. I'm a fan." I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine. That's okay. Thank you. Thanks for being a fan." But like, yeah, there's a lot of people commenting on YouTube and on TikTok, and I'm sorry if I missed some of your comments. That's bound to happen. Tad Murrows says Taco Bell for dinner for sure. LOL. Story guest McDonald's. It's KFC. Okay. I had KFC. Everyone calm down. Okay. I'm not proud of it. It doesn't feel good. I had to go out and return a thing at, what's it called? Harbor Freight. And I was out in my car and I was like, I'm going to stop at this KFC and get some food. And it doesn't feel good. And I'm going to regret it. But that's what I had. Charlie says, thinking of you when I moonwalk. Love that song you posted. Thank you so much. And I posted the song for people who will hear it and like it. And again, I posted that song on Instagram, and somebody in the comments of that song said, just so you know, I would swipe left on this on Spotify, which means that you would, if you heard it come up on Spotify, you would skip the song. You would, and this is a person who follows me. And I said, oh, you don't need to be so rude. And that person responded and said, oh, I'm actually a big fan of yours. I'm just letting you know I don't like this song. I love that people always qualify their rude stuff with like, no, I'm a fan. Like, no. I'm a fan. So I can be rude. Like, it's like, no, I don't care. Like, you're still being rude. And by the way, that song was offered to you as a free piece of entertainment. I just gave it to you for free today. You didn't have to buy it. You didn't have to buy a ticket to a show to watch me play it live. It was just free. And you absolutely could have just been like, oh, I don't really like that song, and just kept scrolling. You didn't have to be like, I don't like this one. Oh God. Do you see how spending too much time in the comments makes me cynical? It's really good. It's really thematic for this episode. The pull towards cynicism, because you comments people really, really, especially the ones that like, have a hard time communicating. I told this person to say something to contribute to the conversation, and they still haven't. This person that was like all mad, this person that was like, I'm a fan, I'm trying to contribute. I told them to contribute and they still haven't. Buddy, the real corn pop, say something. DJ Tremolo says, how about the Kilby Block Party lineup this year? It's insane. It's so good. So good. It's crazy. I'm definitely going to go. I am a little bit bummed out because the last 2 years, Kilby Block Party had me do all their promo, and they didn't have me do it this year. And I was a little bit bummed out because the last couple of years I got free tickets to the festival because I did their promo, and now I have to buy tickets, and I'm bummed out. Haley D on YouTube says, you're having to reply to emails, but depression vid was the realest. Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, there's a video where I'm talking about how like replying to emails while having depression can feel like an impossible task, and that's what she's talking about. Yeah, let's see here. Okay, I think we're sort of out of comments that have to do with the topic of the show. And I think as we're seeing, I'm having a hard time avoiding the cynicism. So I will do my best to embrace a curious mindset, to remember that I'm making my content for the people who are capable of hearing it. So that person, the corn pop person, I was ranting, I was answering questions and being long-winded, as I do. And that person does not like a long-winded rant. So that person is probably not supposed to be a listener of the People Pleaser show. And I need to accept that. And I need to just accept that this show is not for them and it's not their thing. That person requires a lot of like personal attention. That's what they're hoping for in this kind of a space. And I just, I need to accept that. I also need to accept that I take a break and breathe and remember, like, do I value this person's opinion enough to care that they're this mad at me? Yeah, these are all, and again, this is all, I think it all goes back to curiosity, to stopping and asking questions. Because, it's sort of like how anger is a secondary emotion. It comes from fear, usually, and insecurity. And that's a good thing, is like when you get mad, when you get angry, when you're driving in your car and somebody cuts you off and you have that flash of anger, can you let that move through you and experience the emotion and then start asking questions about it and be like, why am I so instantly mad? And like, there'll probably be some thoughts that originally will be like, well, because that person shouldn't be driving like that. They shouldn't be driving, but they were doing something bad. And then it's like, well, let's go deeper. But what's behind, why am I mad? What's creating the anger? And if anger is a secondary emotion, the real question is, what's creating the fear? And the fear is like, I'm driving in a thousands of pounds metal death machine, and I'm very vulnerable in this metal death machine, and we're moving very fast. We're moving at deadly speeds. And that person just did something that like was feet away from killing both of us. And that made me feel really unsafe and scared. And because I was scared, and that person did something that created a sensation of fear in me, fear for my own mortality and life and well-being, I became angry. I lashed out in anger at that person. And I think that kind of curiosity and practicing that kind of curious process can be really useful in trying to combat cynicism. But I'll tell you, I have no reasonable expectation that this is not going to continue to be a day-to-day battle that I fight for the rest of my life. I think for the rest of my life, strangers are going to be pissing me off, and I'm just going to have to deal with it. I was on this podcast the other day, and this guy asked me to name some pet peeves of mine. And I just started talking about like lines and line etiquette, and like how when people don't like respect personal space in a line, or when people like don't understand like how a line works, both lines at a store and like lines with cars where you're like doing a zipper thing and people aren't respecting the order of how things are supposed to go. And I think I have a thing about space and spatial awareness and awareness of people around you too. And I noticed this at dance class the other day, that like nothing bothers me more than when a person like, when I stake out dance class, you have to find your space in the room because it's a very full room. There's a lot of people in a very small and not a very big room. And you have to find your spot and sort of stake out your plot of land to dance in. And it bothers me when I've like staked out my spot and I'm like in my spot in the dance room and someone just like comes in and stands right in front of me. And I'm like, okay, look, I know that space is limited, but you just like chose a spot that's A, too close to me, and B, right in front of me and not like in a windowed space where I can still see myself in the mirror. And like sometimes I'll be filming, it'll be time to film and I'll set up my camera and someone will come and stand like right in front of me when I've clearly set my camera up and I'm standing in front of my camera. And that like lack of spatial awareness, like that the fact that that person doesn't have an awareness of like that I'm right there and that I just set my camera up right in front of that position bothers me. And I have to get curious about stuff like that. I have to like remember that it's not personal. And even if it is, can I be curious about that? My mom says that it happens all the time in her Zumba class. So she knows the struggle. Let's see. Atlas Nomo on YouTube, maybe this will be our last comment, says, I think that any person in a marginalized group is generally conditioned to not act on anger because being a minority in any sense means that it's a finer line to walk to not get swarmed by many peeps. Interesting perspective. It's a really interesting perspective. I think it's a little generalized, but you did say generally. And I'm a person who likes people to respect their very specific word choice. And you did say generally conditioned. So yes, I agree. That could be a general observation about people who exist in marginalized identities. Okay, that's our episode on cynicism. thanks for being here. Thank you for your comments and feedbacks. I'm so sorry to the real corn dog over on TikTok, who apparently really wanted to participate in the conversation, but only to the point of just letting me know that they wanted to participate in the conversation and that they were upset that I wasn't letting them participate. So I'm sorry that you wanted to participate and you weren't able to. And thanks to everyone else who participated, and thank you for your comments. And I'm sorry to everyone whose comments I didn't see. There were a lot of them. So thank you for having a lively discussion. Stick around on TikTok. I think we might sing some songs karaoke style. Yeah, sorry about it, YouTube. You're going to miss out on that. That's the fun thing about being over at the TikTok stream. That's the bonus. People Pleaser is written, edited, hosted, and produced by me, Austin Archer, with original theme music also by me. You can find more of my music by going to austin-archer.com or austinarchermusic.bandcamp.com. You can buy my double vinyl, Beautiful Things, the deluxe edition, over at austinarchermusic.bandcamp.com. Go get that thing. It's sweet. I just sent out 3 of them this week to people who bought them. I love when I get an order in for the double vinyl and I get to package it up and take it to the post office and put it in the mail. Love that. Patreon.com/AustinArcher is another great way that you can support this show on a monthly basis. Just, it's like $4 or $5 a month that you're throwing my way because you appreciate what I'm doing over here. Again, this stuff's free. This podcast, the YouTube content, the videos I'm making on Instagram and TikTok, it's all free. And if you've got the means, I would love to have your support over at patreon.com/AustinArcher. And thank you so much to all of my existing patrons. You are the wind beneath my wings, and I love you so much. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time. Love you so much. Bye-bye.